Hello, all again. Sorry that it's me again. You're probably having more of me than you would maybe like to. My second presentation is about the Prather site that we excavated in Summit County, Ohio. I call this the community on the fringes because this site is located between Cuyahoga Falls to the east, to the north, to the east, and Akron to the south. And if you had been driving out there at the time the site was occupied, the time period that we're looking at, it would have seemed like a very rural kind of a place between these two urban areas. So this gives you a little bit of a sense of place where it is in Summit County. And when we purchased it, when Summit Metro Parks purchased it in 2016, this was a golf course. And it was a connecting piece for us in a couple of ways. The first is that we have been looking at this property for a very long time. This is actually it on the 1925 district master plan for the entire park district. And you can see that this is a small piece that had been recommended that we purchased all the way back in 1925, or try to conserve, I should say, back in 1925. And it connects one of our parks, Cascade Valley, which is to the east, with another of our parks, Sand Run, which is to the west. So it was a connecting piece in that sense for the park district. And it was a connecting piece in another sense in that it connected, so this is the red area is what we purchased in 2016, that's the golf course. And you can see that it connects to this area called Schumacher Woods to the north. That was already land that Metro Parks owned. And that gave us the opportunity to look at the entirety of this road here that runs through, that snakes through Schumacher Woods and down into the piece that we purchased in 2016. This is Honeywell Drive, which was an unpaved private road. I'm sorry, my house is near a large road, if you can hear cars going on behind me. This gave us the opportunity to look at a small neighborhood that had developed here over time. So this is giving you the 1951 aerial of Honeywell Drive here. So you can see that now the entirety of the road was on Metro Parks, is on Metro Parks property, as well as the connector road, Gardner Road, which connected to Honeywell Drive from the south. So this put this entire kind of little piece of infrastructure on Metro Parks land and allowed us to look at it as a complete whole. You can see, actually, I'll go back just a minute. You can see that there are small houses, home sites that are all along this road. And if you walk back through there today, you can see that there are many house foundation remnants there. So we see that things are still there. Up in the kind of the right-hand lower corner, there's a small house that became the home for the caretaker of the golf course. And the property that we purchased connected that small home site as well to the rest of the Honeywell Drive home sites. So we started looking at who was living in those houses, the foundation remnants that we saw, who was living in that area. We started doing cultural resources work after the purchase of the property in anticipation of the restoration work that would be done there over the next few years, because we didn't know what kind of funding that was going to get or what kind of permitting that was going to need. So we just did the cultural resources work kind of preemptively. When we started investigating who lived there, we saw a pattern emerge, and that was that this was a set of African-American and white homeowners who were living along Honeywell Drive. And, as archaeologists, we see patterns, we start to ask questions about why those patterns are there. In doing deeper research, we found that people were moving, as you can see in some of the obituaries here, people were moving from areas of the South up into Northeast Ohio, and many people were working in the rubber industries and the larger industries that were developing here throughout the first part of the 20th century. I've outlined Willie Mae Prather and her husband, George Prather, here because those are the individuals who lived on the house site that we investigated in more detail for this, for the phase 2 project that we did. So as we're looking at who's living there and trying to understand why this pattern is emerging, why is this what looks like kind of an integrated neighborhood? Is this a purposely integrated neighborhood? Are there connections between the people who are living here? Is there an association between community members? Is there an association outside of this neighborhood area that we're not seeing? And what we found is that this was actually a subdivision that was developed by a man named Odell Wheelock. This was Wheelock Acres is the name of the subdivision, Wheelock Acres or Wheelock Cuyahoga Acres. And they were specifically marketed to quote unquote white or colored buyers. You can see also, this is props to their marketing people. Here you find good garden land, large shade trees, ravines and valleys close to the Cuyahoga River. It's beautiful acreage for home sites, you know, so it sounds like it's this very beautiful, picturesque area. So we started to look into what life was like for people who were living in Wheelock Acres. We had some sense of the, you know, why we were seeing the demographics that we were seeing out there, and we started to ask what life was like for people who were living out there. And this is some of the best evidence for this we actually found through newspaper searches. Love newspaper searches. You can see here there's an ad from 1955 for a basement house. 24 by 24 foot basement house with a 1-car cement block garage. We found that this was the case for many of the homes. And there were not ever many homes in this area. It was subdivided into, I think, 50 lots. And there were only ever a maximum of 7 home sites who were out there, which were out there at one time, which also tells you something about what conditions must have been like for people to live out there. You know, this isn't something that people are going and looking at and saying immediately, yes, let's purchase this and build a home here. And part of that is that Honeywell Drive was unpaved. It would have been very difficult to navigate during winter months, during poor weather. So it was a dirt road that had to, and it wasn't maintained by the cities, by either a municipality that it was close to. And this little snippet here, this little article from 1957, I think gives maybe the best idea of what life was like out there. This is detailing a flood that happened in 1957. This is a flash flood event. It flooded a basement home on Honeywell Drive. And as you read the article, you realize that there were 9 people who were living in this basement home. At the time of the flood, the parents were not at home because they were at the wife's mother's house doing laundry because their home didn't have the facilities to do laundry. Another article was published by the Beacon Journal of that was a recalling of the man named Jack Collum, who lived in the Honeywell Drive area in his youth, and he talked about what conditions were like there. And so this is the quote I pulled out. "I was raised in a 1-room tar paper shack down there. We had no running water, no electricity or nothing for years." So it's kind of this picture of a lower socioeconomic status neighborhood. What we found was that there were often basement homes that were built there, and later on people would add another level to their home as they became able to do so. So this was the information that we had from historic documentation of the site. And we wanted to get a better picture of this to see if we could, first of all, because if you've ever done work on a golf course, you know that they are often very messed up from an archaeological point of view. There's a lot of disturbance out there. And this golf course had gone through at least 2 rounds of renovations and landscaping, major rounds of landscaping. So we did cultural resource management investigation. We did a phase 1 survey in 2017 with our citizen science volunteers and University of Akron students. And we actually did end up finding 2 sites in that area that was the Honeywell Drive area. We further investigated one of those sites with a phase 2 investigation in 2018, during which time we did find the foundation of the Prather home, as well as a lot of household artifacts that gave us a real picture of the people that lived there. So this is showing you the fieldwork in 2017. The Prather site is 33 SU 676 here, so towards the center. It's in this kind of odd area of neatly aligned trees, and that is because that was used as a nursery, a makeshift nursery for the golf course. And it's also one of the reasons that I really thought we would find nothing out there. So when we did actually come across some very telling pieces, some artifacts and structural remnants, that was very exciting. We figured based on aerials, historic aerials, that this might be the home. This might be the Prather home, and targeted that in 2018 with our investigations. What we found in 2017 that was exciting was not only the brick and mortar fragments, but in association with those fragments and with other household items, some ceramic ware, some glass, things like that, we also found the bones of a juvenile domestic pig. And that was exciting because one of the other little pieces of information we found, I mentioned earlier, there was a house nearby on Gardner Road, which was a pig farm. And this is an ad from the Akron Beacon Journal in 1958. And this is the person that lived at that pig farm. Mrs. Edwin Kaduri, for instance, has put an ad in the Akron Beacon Journal. She had 8 young shoats or pigs for sale, so she placed the following ad under the livestock column: 8 young shoats, etc., etc., etc. She sold the shoats, say that 3 times fast, and had many more calls in regards to the ad. So we find out on our site this connection between this kind of household economic connection between the house on Honeywell Drive and the house that is outlined here in red to the south, that is the Edwin Kaduri home that was the pig farm. So that was kind of exciting to actually see that in the archaeological record. I mean, we can't prove that that's exactly where they got it, but it seems like a logical possibility. So based off of this, we concentrated the phase 2 work for the 2018 field season at the site that we thought might be the Prather home. This is an aerial photograph showing the excavation units. We did a tighter grid of shovel test units across the site first, and then opened up 2 by 2 meter excavation units in various places where we thought we had better evidence for structural remnants. And of course, as is always seems to be the case, on the last day of the excavation, we found the actual home. We found the foundation for the home. So that was very, very exciting for the students. They worked out there until pretty late that day. They definitely didn't go. I think they were supposed to leave at like 3:30 or 4, and they were out there probably until about 6, trying to get as much excavated as they could. So we found the foundation, and the artifacts that we found, so we found over 5,000, well over 5,000 historic artifacts out at the site, structural remnants, personal items, kitchen, household items, and I think they give us a real sense, a very personal sense of what it would have been like to live in this household. The house itself was built out of this low strength concrete block fragment. We found those, this one's covered with mastic. It's interesting considering the discussion in the newspaper article about flooding there. We found a low strength concrete block fragment here. And I think this also goes back a little bit to what Andy was talking about in his talk, how these houses were being built out there. And these were likely homes that people were building for themselves. So I saw a lot of similarities between the neighborhood he was looking at and what we were looking at out here at Wheelock Acres. So we find this evidence of the concrete block, so how structures are being built, evidence of children, of what recreational activities are. This is a vacuum tube part. This is possibly from a radio, possibly from a television, dated from 1926 to the 1960s, pieces of vinyl record, the Mark's Ford Apache toy set, dating from the 50s to the 80s. We had an older volunteer who was working out on the site who recognized it for what it was. This is another item that we found, fragments of the Woodbury Dream Glow makeup, which was manufactured. This particular their Dream line of makeup was manufactured throughout the 1950s and 1960s. It was an affordable drugstore brand of beauty products. So this is an ad showing, you can see here, peeking behind some of the other makeup is the container that we found, the Dream Glow face powder. And then a sense of what people are also, eating out there. So we found the Seal Test cottage cheese container that dates to the 1960s, plastic bread clip dating from the 1950s. And all of these items paint a really personal picture of who's at Wheelock Acres and the kind of life that they're leading. We also interviewed someone who knew the family, who knew the Prather family as well, and got personal information and details from them and other people who lived nearby, not specifically in Wheelock Acres, but who had lived adjacent to it or who had worked at the golf course at the time that the neighborhood was still there. It was active from the early 1950s. The last house standing was the Prather house, which burned down due to arson in 1975. So again, I saw a lot of kind of overlap with what Kevin was talking about in terms of like occupation, period of occupation. After that home burned down, it was absorbed into that Wheelock Acres, the southern part of it was absorbed into the golf course, and they began using it largely as kind of like a dumping ground for things that they were, construction pieces that they were using around the golf course. And as a final word on this excavation and its outcome, one of the things that's also come up today is this idea of how do we interpret these things and how do we bring them to the public? Working for a park district, that's something we're always thinking about. And as this park is being developed, and go back here to our roadway, one of the interpretation pieces for this road, Gardner Road to the south, has been incorporated into the park because it was incorporated into the golf course. It became a paved through road for the golf course. But Honeywell Drive was really left to kind of go back to nature. As we're thinking about how to incorporate new trails into this area, one of the ideas that we're pushing for, the cultural resources people are pushing for, is to highlight Honeywell Drive, to have that be a trail, and then have a call out, have a sign, have something that indicates where the house was along that trail, so that people can read about the Prather House and about Honeywell Drive and about Wheelock Acres and the conditions that people were living in there. This small community, which I think is often the kind of a community that's overlooked in archaeology because it is small, it is socioeconomically depressed. It was integrated, whether that's purposely or really probably not very purposely. It was an integrated neighborhood, and in the relatively recent past. But it's something that we want to highlight as part of the fabric of this new park because it's part of the land history for this park that we want people to know and to experience as they're going through our new park. That is all I have for you if anybody has questions.
Thank you, Megan. Does anyone have any questions? I have one in case anyone else doesn't.
Okay.
And it's mostly from my memory of being loosely listening in over the years on the project. And I recall it was either Linda or maybe it was Peg looking into a Baptist church nearby, or didn't you found a bunch of stuff with the church? Did you ever end up doing any follow-up with the church, or was it a dead end? Or
We reached out. We reached out a couple of times and we never got any kind of response to it. So I don't know if that was like we were reaching out to the wrong person or what happened there, but I don't think we ever really adequately made a connection there.
okay, I was just curious because I remember that was something that was discussed, but I never knew if there's.
Yeah.
Hmm. I mean, that's hard, like what do you do when trying to find, descendant communities or like, people who might have living histories, and it's like, you know,
We it is hard in a way because a lot of it, so much of it is almost this what snowball sampling essentially. Like you talk to one person and they refer you to another person, to another person, to another person, and that's how we found some of the people that we talked to. The person who had known Willie Mae Prather actually read a friend of that person read an article that one of our employees, Charlotte Gintert, wrote for the Devil Strip news publication. So someone read that article and forwarded it to a friend of theirs who had known Willie Mae Prather, and that person got in touch with us. So that was really totally luck of the draw. But consistently asking questions, asking people, do you know someone who would talk to me? And being the annoying person who calls people up and says, can I come and talk to you is probably the key thing there.
yeah.
We do that a lot.